Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, September 26th, and we got a lot to break down before we get into this weekend. We got to tie up some loose ends. We will start getting into some superlatives for this weekend. The game of the week, the underrated game of the week, there is a number of ones to pick from there. Quarterback battle, I went a little bit different than some might think, and we'll get into all of that in the first segment. Then we got some best bets for you. Went 6-2 last week, so we're heating up just a little bit over here. Hopefully we can continue that momentum into this weekend. Then we got some final thoughts as we head into week 5. We'll get into some injury news, some different things, and also kind of the legend of Dr. Shin that is kind of becoming a cult hero, I suppose, around Sooner Nation. We'll talk about that just briefly here at the end. But let's go ahead and jump into this and let's talk about the superlatives for this upcoming weekend. It is not easy to put together superlatives for a weekend that has probably 15 to 20 games that are well worth your time. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's start with the game of the week. In a week that we have Alabama Georgia, the fact that it's not Alabama Georgia is really remarkable. Oregon at Penn State is the game of the week. This one's it. No two ways about it, at least in my personal opinion, mainly because of the overwhelming stakes of this game. And the thing is, when we talk about games today, especially games early in the season where you have a team like Oregon, you have a team like Penn State, you understand that it's probably not going to affect their ability to get into the playoff. You probably feel like both these teams are playoff teams. I very much feel that way right now. This one isn't about that in any way. This one is about James Franklin and Penn State finding a way to get a win that has eluded them for a very, very long time. 2016 was such a magical moment where they beat Ohio State. They're able to win the Big Ten West, and they move on and they find or Big Ten East, losing the divisions after far too long. They've been gone, but at the end of the day, it was a massive, massive moment for that program, and it kind of felt like a turning point. Didn't end up being that. They went kind of right back to losing to Michigan, losing to Ohio State, and that's not a great sin in the world of college football. Not being able to keep up with those teams doesn't change. That's where Penn State wants to be. They want to be one of the premier programs in the entire country, and they have all the capability in the world to do it. They brought back everyone for this one. And then Oregon comes into town kind of as the new team on the block, the team that is looking to kind of leapfrog Penn State in some respects. They win the Big Ten in their very first season, beating Penn State, beating Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State in the process. And they're a ridiculously talented team coming back this year. That being said, Dante Moore goes on the road for his very first start of his college career. Huge moment for that kid. You have ridiculous amounts of NFL talent on the football field. I imagine a lot of NFL scouts will find their way to Oxford, Mississippi, Athens, Georgia, and up to State College, Pennsylvania this upcoming weekend, because it is going to be some special talents. Dante Moore will be an NFL player, I think, for about 10 or 15 years. Just a beautiful, beautiful throw over the football. A guy that I feel very confident in going forward, even if I don't think he's going to win this matchup. Drew Aller, the prototypical NFL quarterback, needs to show that next level, and this would be the moment to do it. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, including Mekhi Hughes on the other side, who's a great, great player. Dyer Hill becoming a massive player for Oregon in that running back room. Then you got DeCorian Moore, who you're going to have to wait a little bit if you're an NFL scout, but absolutely a star in the making. And then Kyron Hudson, Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, all guys that you absolutely could hear their name called. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's ridiculous. Mateo Uyunglele, Denai Dennis Sutton, you have Zariah Fisher, you have Tony Rojas. It is ridiculous, the amount of NFL talent. A.J. Harris is going to be on this football field. It's going to be special. And then you add in the whiteout. You add in a nighttime kickoff. This one's going to be off the charts incredible. And the fun thing about this dynamic is Oregon's kind of playing with house money. Not to say they can't, they absolutely can lose this game and be totally fine, because it would make the rest of the season kind of a tightrope walk. And you don't have, an incredibly tough schedule, but there are enough trip-up spots to where they really do want to win this game. But the reality of the matter is Penn State needs it. They absolutely need this moment. If they don't win it, then they're going into Columbus with much less confidence than they want to, and then you lose that one, and then the questions continue to pile up. They need to find a way to get this one. I think they find a way to get it. I don't know how it goes. I think it could be all over the place. But at a certain point, you have to get over that hump. I tend to believe Penn State's going to do it this weekend. One way or another, this one's going to be special. You got Cal at Boston College as my underrated game of the week. These are two of the more fun young quarterbacks that you will find in the entire country. Jaren Kiave Sangapula-Tele has done a great job early on in the year. Struggled last week against San Diego State, threw 3 picks, really was all over the place. That's the reality of being a young freshman quarterback. I think he will find a groove. Dylan Lonergan, really incredible player that grew up about 15 miles from me. Went to Brookwood High School here in Atlanta and has done a great job since transferring from Alabama to Boston College. This one's going to be really fun. Lewis Bond and Dylan Lonergan is becoming one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the ACC, maybe even in the entire country, and we got a lot of fun in this one. And frankly, at the end of the year, I think both these teams are going to be looking back on this one thinking maybe that's a turning point for the season. Maybe that's the one that gets us to 8 or 9 wins and puts us really in great position going into 2026 as opposed to losing this one and then maybe fighting for a bowl game at the end of the year. A huge moment for this one, and frankly, two quarterbacks that I think could be absolute stars in the making in 2026 and 2027. The quarterback matchup that I'm watching closely is Julian Sayin against Damon Williams Jr. It's not necessarily the best one of the group. I think I would lean Dante Moore against Drew Allar if I had to be honest there, but this one is just so fascinating to me. Two young quarterbacks that frankly I think both have Heisman potential. I think both have the ability to not only sniff that this year, but especially be a part of the main crew going into 2026 when you talk about that prestigious award. Julian Sayin's one of the most pure throwers of the football I have ever seen. It's really comfortable coming out of his hand, a lot like that CJ Stroud type quarterbacking, maybe not quite as much arm strength outright, but the elite ability to put the ball wherever he wants is incredible. He's going on the road to an atmosphere that is very tough. It is going to be a battle for him to keep his wits about him, and I think they're going to need to throw the ball around just a little bit in this football game to get the win. On the other side, you have a guy that is just appointment television. If you're not watching Damon Williams week in and week out, you are not doing yourself a favor because this guy is so much fun to watch. He always gets out of precarious situations, especially against a team like Ohio State that is going to be faster, more physical, more athletic. He's going to have to get out of some weird situations, and he is more than capable of doing that. This could be his moment in the sun. This could be the moment where everyone says, that kid up there in Seattle is playing some really good football, and that team up there in Seattle could totally change the narrative in the Big 12 this upcoming, or Big 10 this weekend, because the reality is there's so many massive games around the conference. This one's kind of fallen under the radar, and there's a moment here for Washington to really make a push. And I think these two quarterbacks are just downright special. Whether it's this year or in 2026, I think you're going to see these two guys at the firm head of the Heisman conversation here pretty soon, and it's going to be so much fun to see what they can do, especially with Julian Sayin going on the road for his very first time. The team that I think will impress the most this upcoming weekend is the USC Trojans, and this really is interesting because when you look at the travel dynamics going into this weekend for USC, it has not been kind to them by any means. They go on the road to play a Purdue team that might be a little bit more feisty than I was giving them credit for. Apologies to the Boilermakers up there, but they're playing some really solid football. Then come back down to LA, and they play an 11 p.m. kick. Well, 11 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. Pacific time, and they win that game against Michigan State. Now they turn back around and go to Champaign, Illinois. It's something that Lincoln Riley talked about earlier this week, just saying that's a whole lot to put on our shoulders. Now, that's part of what you get when you play in the Big Ten instead of sticking with your conference. But at the end of the day, it is a huge moment to see what USC can do. I don't know how high people are in Illinois, so maybe if USC wins by 14, it's not all that impressive at the end of the day, at least to a lot of people. I tend to believe there's going to be a moment where USC shows that they're a true contender, at least for the CFP. Jade Mayava shows that he is at the very top of the Heisman conversation moving forward. The defense is the area of worry. No two ways about that, but I really do think they did enough in the offseason to, I don't want to say dominate this matchup by any means. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. I do think they're going to be able to be opportunistic, especially as the season goes on, as they get more confident, as a guy like Keyshawn Silver continues to have a big-time impact for this football team. Jamal Jarrett, another huge pickup they got from Georgia in the interior of that defensive line. I think they have enough. I don't think it's going to be perfect. I think that defense is going to have to make a couple of plays per weekend. They're heading into a bye week before Michigan and Notre Dame is USC. They got to find a way to win it. I think they do, and I think they look pretty good doing it, and it makes those two games coming up much more massive when you talk about the CFP landscape. My upset of the week honestly felt like a layup, and it's making me feel a little bit nervous. UCF over Kansas State. I don't know how Kansas State is getting points at this point. This is not a very good football team. This is a team that put up 17 points on Arizona, got ran all over by Ishmael Mahdi, and if you do that, there's a real chance you're going to give up a lot to UCF. They're giving up over 200 yards per game as Kansas State, and now you're put in a position where Jaden Nixon, Ja'Cory Brown, you obviously have Taven Jackson taking over at quarterback, and although he's more the passing option of that kind of dual quarterback situation they have going on down there in Orlando, he's plenty capable of getting out on the edge and making some plays with his legs as well. I just don't think Kansas State is going to be up for the challenge. They are coming off a bye, which gives them a little bit of an opening, but when you look at this UCF team, they're playing pretty good football, and they're sticking to their guns. They're going to run the football consistently. They're going to try to wear you down, and they have so many different ways to attack you. I think UCF is able to get this win. I think they're able to continue to move forward, and KSU, I just really don't know what I'm getting week to week at this point. I know for a fact I'm not getting a good passing performance from Avery Johnson at this point. So I think you're put in a position where if one team's going to run the ball absolutely down your throat and totally control possession, and the other team is probably going to give you a couple of mistakes from time to time, I'm going to take the team that even on the road, I believe UCF is able to do this, able to control the pace of this game, and probably run for 200 or 250 in this game, and Jaden Nixon leads the way to a big-time win for UCF. And then finally, the chaos game of the week, it's Alabama-Georgia. I don't think I have to tell anyone that. After what we saw last year, it was insane in Bryant-Denny last year under the lights, and I don't think we're going to get that. I can't promise that we're going to get a 28-point comeback that ends with probably the most special play that I've ever seen, individual effort on a specific play that I've ever seen from Ryan Williams. I don't think we're getting that. I do think we're getting two teams that are really struggling to at least play consistent football. Now, Alabama has looked good through the first couple of or the last couple of weeks, but at the end of the day, it is still a very up and down team. It is still a very questionable team, particularly on the road. For Georgia, that secondary is not playing all that well. That means Ty Simpson and Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard and all these guys they have are going to have openings. You get Jam Miller back, which is a massive boost to that offense. For Georgia, we've seen what they can do downfield. And obviously, Alabama might be a little bit more equipped, but that's still a relatively young group, particularly at the cornerback positions. Maybe Georgia can take a little bit more advantage of that than we think right now. The big thing here that makes me think it's going to be a chaos game is neither of these offensive lines are really living up to the hype. Neither of these groups are really doing what they're supposed to be doing, at least through a couple of games of the season. They're giving up sacks. They're giving up big-time pressures. They're not running the ball all that efficiently, or at least consistently. Georgia was able to do it at times against Tennessee, but needs to continue to kick up that. That probably means there's going to be sacks. There could be fumbles, scoop and scores, INTs, all that crazy stuff that happened last year in Alabama. I think it could very well happen in Athens this time around. I don't know if it's going to be as crazy because, frankly, I don't know if any game is going to be as crazy going forward as that one was in Bryant-Denny. But at the end of the day, I think this one goes down to the wire, and I think it's going to be an absolute ride to get there. So I think this one's going to be really fun over there in Athens, Georgia, as the one was last year, and we're going to get an absolute matchup that we're talking about all the way to the end of the year, regardless of the outcome. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, let's talk about the best bets. As we head into this weekend, I got 8 bets, went 6-2 last week, so you might want to tail these, getting a little bit hot over here, but we got a couple of them that I feel weirdly confident about, and we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the superlatives for this upcoming weekend. When you got about 20 different games that are going to be awesome, it's pretty hard to pull that off, but got to put together a pretty good list there. And now, It's time for my best bets. Went 6-2 last week, officially over 500 on the season, 17-16 on the year, and we got some good ones this week that maybe I feel too confident about, which I don't know how to feel about. Always, whenever you're thinking about bets, you're always really confident, and then you get overly confident, and you think you should go the other way. Just the way this thing works. But let's roll with what I think are very, very strong bets, and we'll start with maybe my favorite one of the weekend just because I think it's going to be really fun to watch. Arkansas Notre Dame over 63.5. This one's just bound to be a shootout. When you have Taylor Green throwing the ball around at the level that he is and Notre Dame defending the pass at the level they are, they've given up 27 points per game in every single game they've played thus far, and I think this is the best passing attack you're going to get. I mean, when you talk about A&M, they're remarkably explosive. I think Arkansas is right up there when you talk about explosivity, especially when you talk about a guy like Omega Blake. I think as long as they avoid Leonard Moore on the other side, Arkansas is going to be able to put up points, and Arkansas can't stop the run. That is the big issue with this football team. We saw it against Memphis. We saw it against Ole Miss with Keywan Lacey having a great day. I think the same thing happens here. I think they go back and forth. I do have Arkansas being able to get a win in this one, but at the end of the day, I know for a fact we're going to get some points. Just got to hope it gets over that 63.5. TCU plus 3.5 versus Arizona State. This is one that I think is going to be a really fun matchup. I don't know how I feel about the Arizona State back end because it's not necessarily that they have bad players or anything or they're missing the mark by too much, but there's moments in this football game where Josh Hoover's going to have openings and he's going to hit them. He has been absolutely incredible early on in this season, and he's been able to find guys down the field in big-time moments, especially a guy like Eric McAllister. And frankly, you might have the two best wide receivers in the entire conference playing in this game when you talk about Eric McAllister for TCU and Jordan Tyson for Arizona State. I think this one's going to be a little bit up and down, a little bit all over the place, but if you're giving me 3.5 points with Josh Hoover on the other side, I'm going to take that. I think there's going to be an opening here for TCU to make a couple of big plays early. Arizona State might have to fight from behind, and if that's the case, then I don't know what I've seen from Sam Leavitt to make me think that he can really orchestrate a big-time comeback in this football game. Washington, Ohio State over 51.5 is my next one. I just love the quarterback battle, and I really do think the Washington offense is one of the more underrated groups in the entire country. When you talk about Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, and Denzel Boston, that's a really good trio of quarterback, running back, wide receiver. It is going to be a really, really tough battle for an Ohio State defense that has looked as good as any. There's no two ways about that. And frankly, I think they're about as good as you're going to find in the entire country. Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio State, those are the teams that have been incredible defensively. I think there's a little bit of an opening here, not necessarily for Washington to totally gash them, but at the very least to play with a little bit more balance than some of the teams that they've played before, particularly a Texas team that just couldn't pass the ball in that football game. I think they're going to be able to pass the ball, and also Jonah Coleman's going to be really hard to stop for this Ohio State defense, at least consistently. I think they can hold him under 100 yards, but can they do that and hold him where he doesn't have a 15-yard run or he doesn't have a 20-yard run that opens things up for this Washington offense? And then on the other side, the Washington defense has really struggled at times. And when you have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate on the other side, I am not going to feel confident that you're going to be able to really slow down this offense. I think they're going to be able to do enough to Julian saying to keep this thing close, but I think we're looking at like a 34-27 type football game where Washington makes some big-time plays early, and then Ohio State's able to kind of take over late with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and Julian saying, who I think is going to have a little bit of a coming-out party in this football game. I think this one has a lot of points, honestly, and I think this Washington offense is getting a little bit disrespected early on in the season. UCF plus 6.5 or plus 5.5 or plus 6.5. I believe it moved up. Plus 6.5 versus Kansas State. This is one that I feel very confident about. Maybe too confident about, but I do think UCF is going to be able to run the football in this game. Kansas State has really struggled to stop the run. We saw what Ishmael Mahdi did for Arizona last week. Jaden Nix can do that and more. He's a very, very talented player, and when you have the quarterback run game to add into that where Arizona didn't as much, it's going to be really, really hard to beat. Ja'Cory Brown has been a huge piece for them as kind of that second quarterback in a dual quarterback system. He is going to be huge in this football game. I think Kansas State is a team that I just can't feel good about right now. I don't know where the passing game is going to come from really anywhere, and without Dylan Edwards, they lack any explosivity on offense, especially in the run game. I think it's going to be really, really tough for Kansas State to win this one. I think UCF wins outright, but if you're giving me 6.5, I'll take 6.5. Iowa State minus 5.5 over Arizona. This is another one I feel very confident about. Arizona was able to get the win over Kansas State last week on the back of Ishmael Mahdi. They're not going to be able to do that against this Iowa State defense. Iowa State has been very, very good against the run, only giving up, I believe, just over 100 yards per game. They're a very, very stout group, very well coached, and I think Noah Fafita has played good football thus far. I think there's a couple of mistakes in there to be had, and when you have Jontez Williams and all the guys on the back end for Iowa State, they're going to be able to make plays. I can almost promise you that. I think Iowa State had their bad moment against Arkansas State on the road. Then they get a bye week. They're able to regroup. I think they're going to be able to attack this week very aggressively, and I think Iowa State's going to be able to run the ball pretty consistently, control this football game, and win it by at least a touchdown, maybe even 10 or 14 points, frankly. I love the Cyclones this weekend, and then you got a little bit of a logjam at the top of the Big 12. BYU minus 6.5 at Colorado. This is a game that BYU's been playing really good football, and it's been playing the football that we saw BYU play a year ago, where it's a little bit scrappy, it's a little bit not perfect at times, but they're running the football very effectively with LJ Martin. Bear Brockmeyer is handling the football really well, not putting the ball in harm's way, and then they're making enough plays on the outside with Chase Roberts and company. So at the end of the day, when you look at this Colorado football team, they're getting better. They're slowly kind of finding their way, and I do think that in 2026, they're going to be able to put a pretty good football team on the field. Right now, they can't stop the run in any way, and LJ Martin, if you have him coming to town, it's going to be really, really hard to do it then. So I think LJ Martin in this BYU offense is able to put on a show. I think Caden Salter is bound to make a couple of mistakes against this BYU defense, and I think there's going to be an opening. Now, Bear Bachmeier going on the road to Colorado is a little bit of a worry, but frankly, I don't think you're going to have to do that much to cover the 6.5, particularly with a Colorado offense that has been so up and down with the quarterback stuff that has been going on. I think BYU is going to put them in a absolute stranglehold, and BYU is going to be able to win this one relatively comfortably on the road. Cal Boston College over 52.5. We talked about it as an underrated game. If you're giving me these two quarterbacks, then I am going to take the over. JKS and Dylan Lonergan are very, very fun players. They can sling the ball all over the field. You got Lewis Bond on one side. You got Jacob DeJesus and company on the other side. BC gave up 42 to Michigan State. Wasn't overtime, but at the end of the day, still gave up quite a few points. Cal gave up 36 last week to San Diego State, with the help of JKS just a little bit there with 3 turnovers. But at the end of the day, I don't think either defense is going to be able to stop the other. I think Cal going on the road maybe puts them in a little bit of a tougher spot, at least to get off to a strong start in this game. But I think there will be enough plays to be had. I think both these quarterbacks have big-time days, and they give us a very, very fun one to end off the day in the ACC. I think Cal Boston College is going to be an absolute shootout. And then one more over just to make things interesting. Texas A&M Auburn over 52.5. A&M has really struggled to stop the run pretty much all year, and Jeremiah Cobb is a very, very talented running back, right up there with a guy like Robert Henry that came in there with UTSA, currently leading the country, the FBS at the very least, in rushing yards through a couple of weeks. I think Jeremiah Cobb can do that. And also, when you add Jackson Arnold into the mix, it keeps guys like Cassius Howell just at bay for a second longer. Scooby Williams, if he does play in this game, I believe he is going to, he will have to just find out where the ball is for that half second longer, and that opens runs lanes. It's absolutely huge for this Auburn offense. I think they're going to be able to find enough. And then on the other side, I don't think anyone's stopping this A&M passing attack. I really don't. Now, there's going to be openings at the very least. Marcel Reed has missed a couple of guys. There's definitely some things that he's going to have to clean up. He has sailed a couple of balls, did that against Notre Dame that he got a little bit lucky weren't taken away. This is a game where Auburn can take advantage of that. But at the end of the day, when you have Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion playing at that level, I don't really know what you do as a secondary, if I'm being totally honest. I think it's going to be a nightmare of a game for the A&M back or the Auburn back end. I think the A&M front side is going to have a really tough time. Connor Liu playing in this game for Auburn is going to be huge. I think he is going to go, but we'll see what happens there with that offensive line. But I think when you mix an Auburn rushing attack that can be so effective with a really, really rough Texas A&M rushing defense, and then the other way around, an Auburn team that has done relatively well against the pass early on, but against an offensive line that should be able to slow down Kelger Falk and company, I think there's going to be openings, and I think Marcel Reed's going to take advantage of them. Give me over 52.5. I think we have a really fun one coming in College Station, but all of these games are so incredible. And frankly, I think it's one of those weekends where you look at the slate and you feel a little bit too confident in some of the picks. I think Iowa State is going to roll over Arizona State. I think UCF is going to win that game in Manhattan. At the end of the day, some of these are going to go awry, but we're rolling a 6-2 record. Last week we were 5-3 the week before that. Let's keep it rolling. Let's hopefully maybe go to 7-1 this week, and then we can keep this thing rolling down a hill. But at the end of the day, let's take our last break. When we come back, just some final thoughts on Week 5. We'll get into the 4 major matchups, the 4 ranked matchups, and then just give some final thoughts around the 15 other incredible games that we're going to get this upcoming weekend right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just gave up my best bets for this upcoming weekend. Went 6-2 last week. Hopefully, we can continue that streak. So, if you need a couple of good bets, hopefully I can give you those this week. But let's get into some final thoughts as we head into a Week 5 that I can't even describe. It is absolutely perfect. It is everything that you want college football to be. We have massive games at every single time slot. We have 2 night games that, frankly, I'm going to have to find another massive TV so I can get 2 big TVs. They both deserve massive TVs for these matchups at night. It's going to be incredible. And then when you look at the undercard, it's games that would be the biggest game in any other weekend of the entire year. It is incredible what we are getting into this upcoming weekend. And let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll start with the 2, let's say, warm-up games. I don't want to disrespect it all, but let's say warm-up games, and then we'll get into the big 2 right in a second. But USC, Illinois, one game that is just so massive for so many different reasons. And frankly, you look at a USC team, I think a lot of people aren't taking them fully seriously, and I understand why. The defense has not been good enough in previous years. The offense has always been something that you've been able to, at the very least, rely on somewhat. Now, last year was a weird anomaly for those Lincoln Riley teams, but they seem to be back to that level. They're playing really, really good offensive football. For Illinois, you got to get off the mat. If you don't get off the mat here, it is not going to get easier the rest of the way. I believe you get Penn State here pretty soon. I believe you get Ohio. I'm forgetting what the schedule is. Apologies. It does not get easier for Illinois the rest of the way. It is definitely going to be a huge battle, and one that if USC finds a way to win, they're right there with a Michigan, with a Indiana, with someone that wants to be that 4th team from the Big Ten, because I think everyone feels that it's going to be Oregon, it's going to be Penn State, it's going to be Ohio State. If Ohio State loses to Washington this weekend, everything is on the table, where you have Washington, USC, maybe Illinois, Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, all of these teams that are very much vying for those spots in the CFP, and plenty of time to figure all of that out, but you got to start on the right foot. Illinois started on the very wrong foot last week, and this is a game where they can find their footing or they can fall on their face and really not get up for the rest of the season, and they look at a year where they thought they were going to the CFP. They might be fighting for 7 or 8 wins by the end of this thing. And for USC, it's a moment where Lincoln Riley can kind of turn the narrative on its head. Now, people are still going to question that defense. There's no question about that. But at the end of the day, I do think there's going to be a little bit of an opening here where you win this game. At the very least, people are looking at you as a real CFP contender, and you got a schedule that you can really handle going forward. As far as injuries go, you got a couple of injuries in that secondary for Illinois, a couple of leaders that are not going to be able to play in this game, and Jacoby Lane on the other side for USC is not going to play. So what other wide receiver? Mekhi Lemon is going to be a piece of this football game, but who else can step up for USC on the outside to attack a very questionable, very thin Illinois back end? LSU Ole Miss, the game that frankly should get top billing this weekend. If it was on any other weekend, pretty much of the entire year, this would be the main game because it's number 4 against number 13. It was a game last year that went to overtime. It's a game that is introducing a quarterback to the world that no one knew the name of going into this season, that was coming up from D2 Ferris State, that the only way you knew this name is if you were really paying attention to the transfer portal. I knew the name. I didn't know he was this good. I promise you that. He has played incredible football through a couple of weeks. I believe had 400 plus total yards in both games, went for over 100 rushing in both games. I tend to believe that's not going to happen in this one, if I'm being totally honest with you. And I think it's a huge moment for both these coaches. I think Lane Kiffin is looking at this one and saying, if we win this one, we are firmly on our way to the CFP. Because you look back at last year, a couple of mistakes in that LSU game changes that entire season. And obviously, the Kentucky game and the Florida game obviously played a big role in that as well. But this was a moment for them to totally take control and take over the SEC, and they left it on the table. This is another moment where you can go into a game where the LSU offense isn't lighting anything on fire recently. They're definitely struggling. If Garrett Nussmeier is healthy, I feel confident they can find a way to put something together, but this is a good opening for Ole Miss. It's about as good of an opening as you're going to have against this LSU team going forward. You have a quarterback that, yes, they now have tape on, but you still don't fully know the tendencies of. You're at home. You have a quarterback on the other side that probably isn't 100%, probably is getting closer, but probably not 100% quite yet. I think you got a moment here if you're Ole Miss, and if you leave it on the table, I think it could be the moment that you remember at the end of the day when you're number 14 or 15 in that final CFP poll for LSU. You lose it, and all the goodwill that Brian Kelly has built up around that fan base goes away in a hurry. I can absolutely promise you that. And they're looking at the rest of their schedule thinking, do we even have a shot to get back into the CFP race because we beat a Clemson team that not proven to be the win that we thought it was. So at the end of the day, it's a massive one for narrative. It's a massive one for the talk outside the game. It's a massive one for the Kiffin family and the Weeks family. Let's just put it on the table there. But including the Weeks family, Wes Weeks is going to play in this football game. Caden Durham seems like he's kind of working his way towards playing, someone they absolutely need if you're LSU. And Trey'Dez Green looks like he's likely to play for Ole Miss. They look relatively healthy. A couple of injuries at that wide receiver position, but nothing super aggressive. They absolutely are rolling into this game, and they could use a huge one here. Now we get to the big boys. Oregon at Penn State. Penn State still favored by 3.5 in this one. It can't be said enough how big this game is. It is a massive moment for James Franklin, and I get it. It is not a game that is going to knock you out of the CFP. It is not a game that is going to kill James Franklin. James Franklin can go on to beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, get into the CFP, and become the coach that we've been waiting on him to be. The reality of the matter is, it's never going to get better than this weekend. The opportunity is never going to get better than a young quarterback going on the road for his very first time at night for a whiteout when you have all of the guys returning. You have all of the veteran talent. You have all of the steady heart rates, or at least you should, going into this football game. You're going up against a coach that is going to give you everything that you can handle. I can promise you that. Dan Lanning doesn't go into games thinking we can lose it and go into the CFP. He doesn't care about house money. He plays every game as far as he needs to. He plays every game as aggressive as he needs to. I've gone back and forth on this pick. Frankly, I had Oregon picked until about 30 minutes before I did that prediction show. I flipped to Penn State for a couple of reasons. I think Penn State can run the ball, and I really do think this group is different. I think mentally this group is a little bit different than the past groups. Now, Drew Aller is still a question mark. I think this is the moment where he steps up. I think this is the moment where he puts some of that narrative to bed that he can't step up in big games. He makes some big-time throws. The receivers that they brought in make some big-time plays, and I think Penn State gets it done. I don't think it's necessarily super pretty. I don't think it's going to be perfect. I think you find a way to get the win that you've been waiting on for a very long time. And then people turn their attention and say, well, now you got to beat Ohio State. That's the nature of the world that you live in if you're Penn State. But I think you get the win here. You're going to have to deal with Noah Whittington coming back from injury at running back for Oregon. Very talented, just a guy that can change the game on a dime. Pretty much no more needs to be said there. A guy that can totally change the game. Got to make sure you keep him under wraps. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take Penn State in this one. It's everything for Penn State fans. It's everything for James Franklin. I get it. The CFP does not factor in nearly as much as it used to in these types of games. That doesn't matter here. It's all about pride. It's all about James Franklin finding a way to get this one done, and Penn State finding a way to get on top at night in a whiteout. It's going to be special. I think Penn State gets it done, but if they don't, we got tough conversations to have on Monday. Alabama on the road at Georgia. This one's always special. There's no two ways about that. Another one that I changed very late on, I had Alabama picked until about 30 minutes before I started recording. I had Alabama being Alabama and just beating Georgia the way that they always do. I flipped late for a couple of reasons. I think this Georgia team has a competitive character that they haven't had over the past couple of years. And that doesn't mean anything. That really doesn't mean anything, at least tangibly, in this football game, but it does. When you talk about a guy in Gunnar Stockton that goes on the road to Tennessee for his very first time for a Tennessee fan base that felt like this was the moment, felt like that was the moment where they take down Georgia, he did not blink. He did not miss a beat. He always made the throw that they needed him to make. He did everything that they needed him to do in that football game. You have a Georgia football team that has a lot of players that have seen success, but haven't been a part of that success, and they badly want to. I think a Chris Cole is going to be huge in this football game. I think on the other side, a Quay Rousseau is going to be huge in this football game. A Tim Keenan coming back from injury, Jam Miller coming back from injury, Jamarian Latham coming back from injury. It's going to be huge in this football game, and I just think these two defenses are going to fly around. We talked about it in the Penn State-Oregon game. This one isn't about the CFP. Both these teams are firmly in the mix now. Alabama getting to their second loss, absolutely. Will put them on a little bit more of a tightrope. There's no two ways about that, but this one goes beyond the CFP. This one's about Georgia getting over that mental hurdle. This is about Alabama continuing to define what the SEC is year in and year out, regardless of if they are on an up year or a down year. They are the dominant team in the SEC. That's what they want to prove. Georgia wants to prove that this is officially their conference now. With Nick Saban gone, yeah, last year happened, but you find a way to win this football game. You go on to win your second SEC title in a row. It's Georgia's conference going forward, and Alabama's time has kind of come to an end, at least as the dominant team in the SEC. But at the end of the day, this one's about everything. It's about family rivalries where you have a sister that goes to Alabama and a brother that goes to Georgia. This is about Kirby Smart getting over the hump against the old team that he used to work for. This is everything for that area of the country. It's going to be a massive matchup, and I think this one is going to be downright special the way the one last year was. And then just some final thoughts. Ohio State, Washington. I just love this football game. I think everyone's going to be locked in on this football game more than they thought they were going into the weekend, if I'm being totally honest. I think this one is downright special. I think these two very well could have everything to do with what the Big Ten is going forward, as much as Oregon Penn State could, frankly. Because if Washington wins this football game, then Ohio State's fighting an uphill battle. If Ohio State's able to win, Washington's trying to find a way to battle back in, knock off a couple of guys later in the season. But it's a huge moment for those two football teams. Auburn, Texas A&M. This one just has a weird energy about it. Auburn comes off a game where it's just about how do you respond to a game that, frankly, you probably should have won in a lot of different ways. And it's a moment where Auburn's been quite a few times, maybe not in this context, but at the end of the day, you've been in the spot where you're coming off a game where you probably should have won, going into a game where you're not going to be favored. Can they find a way to get it done? I think it's going to be an absolute fist fight. I think A&M gets away with one here, but I think it's going to be a fist fight late in this one, and I think it's going to be really fun to watch that one unfold. For Indiana, Iowa, Iowa's got to come into this one thinking they can get the upset. Now, the worry that I do have is, can they remotely pass the ball? They scored 38 points. They threw the ball 18 times. I don't know how you do that, but at the end of the day, they were able to do that against Rutgers last week. Indiana's got to win this one. And if they're able to keep their foot on the gas pedal, they will get it done. They'll absolutely dominate this team, and they'll move into probably that fourth spot in the Big Ten that we've talked about ad nauseum at this point. Is a hotly debated topic right now. We'll see if Indiana can jump into that spot this weekend. And then Tennessee, Mississippi State. This one reeks, man. This one reeks of an upset. This one reeks of a game that you're going to be absolutely tuning into deep into into the Penn State-Oregon game or the Alabama-Georgia game. You're going to be making sure you have an eye on Tennessee-Mississippi State, because I just think this one comes down to the wire. I said coming into the season, Mississippi State is going to clip two teams this year. They're going to find a way to get two teams. They're going to find a way to trip up a couple of them. They already did it to Arizona State. Can they do it to Tennessee here? Could they do it to a team later in the season? I just think there's an opening here. Now Tennessee, they got to be able to find get their wits about them coming off that loss to Georgia, but at the end of the day, I think Mississippi State is a lot more live here than some people are giving them credit for. I think we got a good one coming in Stark Vegas. It's an incredible week. I can't say enough about this weekend. This weekend is absolutely special in every sense of the word. You got two matchups that could very well be national championship previews. You got another matchup that, frankly, could very well be that as well with LSU Ole Miss. It is a game that is going to define so many different narratives. There will be narratives that were created this weekend. There will be upsets this weekend. There will be narratives that are torn down by a James Franklin or a Kirby Smart or an Alabama and Kalen DeBoer. Everyone saying they're dead. They go into Athens and get a win. They are definitely no longer dead. There is so much on the table this upcoming weekend. You have the Big Four, Big Two technically, with Penn State, Oregon, and Ohio State, and Alabama, Georgia. Then you got LSU, Ole Miss. You got USC, Illinois, two ranked matchups. Then let's just go through this. You got Ohio State, Washington, FSU, Virginia tonight, TCU, Arizona tonight, USC, Illinois, Notre Dame, Arkansas, Auburn, A&M, Indiana, Iowa, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Arizona, Iowa State, and so much more. This is in a weekend where get as many TVs as you possibly have, put them in your place, get a very, very comfortable seating arrangement, and let it happen. It's going to be incredible. There's going to be upsets. There's going to be a lot of movement in these conferences. We're going to find out a lot about new teams, and a lot of CFP spots, or at the very least, are going to be penciled in this upcoming weekend. It is going to be massive. It's going to be everything that we want it to be. Strap in, buckle up. It is going to be incredible. Thank you so much for tuning in to another week of great shows of the Just Another College Football Podcast. We will be back on Monday to break it all down, and frankly, I think that one's going to be pretty long because I think this weekend's going to be downright special. We will break it all down on Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment. Means the absolute world to me. But thanks again, and I will see you guys on Monday.